Imagine you had a whole crowd of people who just got diarrhea, and then they announced, oh, no shitting allowed. That's what's going on here. And it's only a matter of time before there's an explosion.
This is Hot Take Express with Kent Chamberlain, and I am your aforementioned host, Kent Chamberlain. Today's episode is called Cyberbullying the Theater Kids, and we'll be looking at Caleb Maupin, the CPI, what they really stand for, and why people should know. The more perceptive commies in this country are curious as to how to tap into the same sort of working class energy that MAGA has. We radical Republicans are doing it by directly joining the GOP and working with them to achieve their political goals. We have nothing to hide, we want a second Trump administration, we're willing to do the work for it, and all of our goals and aspirations and strategies can be read for free off our website in case anyone wants to question our motives. There are other communist groups and actors in America who are also MAGA curious, but they go about it in different ways than we have. Some of them, like Jackson Hinkle and Infrared, are kind of based and operating on another level from everyone else. Any conservative, libertarian, or MAGA supporter should check those two out. There will be a few things here or there you might not agree with, but you'll be pleasantly surprised by how much you will agree with. But there is another group of commies out there that appear at first blush to be taking the MAGA movement seriously. I'm not sure that they can be trusted, however. Like Hillary Clinton, they have a public position and a private position. They're happy to lie to the faces of American patriots about their true beliefs so that they can use you for their own ends, which have little to do with fighting globalism or the deep state. Indeed, they're actually helping strengthen those things with the positions they aren't telling you about. I'm, of course, referring to the CPI, or for those who don't know, the Center for Political Innovation. It's led by a guy named Caleb Maupin, whose day job is being an American correspondent for Russia Today. That's pretty based of him, actually, and though it's the problem a lot of shitlibs have with him, it's not mine. If anything, I'm about to fault him for not agreeing with Russia enough. I'm also not going to pretend that my opposition to him is personal, although I think his personal attacks against me for, that's right. Being autistic means that he's been a very naughty boy. I'm not going to stoop to his level and try to degrade or humiliate him through his personal life. My arguments are too strong. They don't need or want that kind of help. By the way, if you didn't see that screenshot before, I'd offered to debate all of this with Caleb, and he turned me down on the basis that I thought I was smarter than the Uhurus. It's funny he thought differently about debates where he considered himself the smartest person in the room.
And I look back on that and I'm angry. And the reason I'm angry is because I know what that was about. It was about the fact that the people that were the bosses of my political group, the Workers' World Party, are dumb. I mean, there's no other way of putting it, right? Certain people, I won't name their names, that always got to be the center of attention in the group, that always got to be the big speakers at the conferences, that always got to be the center of attention at everything. They weren't too sharp. And if we were going to debate libertarians, if we were going to do anything as a party, they had to be in the spotlight. It had to be about them. And they were dumb. And they wouldn't be able to debate these libertarians. So because they couldn't do it, nobody could do it. And that's infuriating to me.
Even if I'm not going to respond in kind, I'm not the only dude Caleb personally attacks. He consistently supports the Uhurus, this pack of land backroom America haters, and says that solidarity with any group being threatened by the federal government is the duty of an anti-imperialist. Curiously, though, this principle doesn't lead to the Uhurus supporting Trump. On the contrary, those guys call for the FBI to investigate him, in my opinion, because the Uhurus are an FBI front group themselves.
If they gonna raid something, they need to raid Trump Towers.
But no, despite insisting that we all have to support anti-imperialists under federal scrutiny no matter what or we're the bad guys, he'll totally front-stab Jackson Hinkle in public right after he was detained on his way back from Russia, based only on self-admitted rumors that he never bothered to substantiate.
And he's actually said quite a few nasty, negative things about me. That's unfortunate. Now, I'm not here to pick a fight with him, but stuff is getting back to me. Stuff I can't confirm, but, people are saying it's according to some credible sources. Not going to repeat it because I'm not here to repeat it. But the way the internet works is even though he has nothing to do with me at this point, even though he's dissed me pretty badly, people are going to try to use this, if it ends up being true or whatever, people are going to try to use this to attack me.
And it's not just Jackson either. I don't know too much about Midwestern Marks, but here Caleb is front stabbing him for no reason other than perhaps jealousy and because he has an online presence. Watch this.
You know, I just try not to think about Midwest Marks, to be honest with you. I just try not to think about them because they are more or less trying to create a social media network that has kind of the same message that we have, you know, and so I guess that's good if that's what you're about, but we're trying to build an actual movement. And on top of that, they do not seem to understand, you know, that anyone who does this gets canceled. And the way they conduct themselves disappoints me sometimes because they seem to assume that what has happened to me, what has happened to Peter Coffin and other people, that this is just because we're dumb or something.
So right off the bat, we see that this guy is unprincipled. He and his associates hold others to standards they themselves don't hold. Supporters might just say I'm trolling, which is handy for them. They have a built-in ideological construct now that lets them dismiss all such criticism as trolling.
We don't want to engage with the masses via hostile trolls because trolls don't represent what the masses of people think. They represent what people who are trying to get under your skin, trying to offend you, trying to hurt your feelings, trying to fight you. They represent what trolls think. They're trolling. They're going out of their way to generate a negative response, generate a negative interaction. They don't represent what the masses think.
However, when Caleb himself criticizes, that's always really important, to the point that he wants you to go cyberbully his political enemies for him. And granted, yeah, the org that he's doing it to in this case are a bunch of imperialists, but still, these are harsher forms of the tactics he whines about being done to him. But no, this isn't supposedly trolling whatsoever.
Personally, I think that everyone should email Betsy Yoon right now. And I will drop her email in the chat. And I think we should all give her a piece of our minds. Send her an email. Just give her your thoughts. Send her an email, please. Please, give her a piece of your mind.
Cherry on top? You can listen to him preach here about not doing all the divisive stuff I just showed you he does.
No one seems to understand this. No one seems to get this. That the people who more or less agree with you about Russia and Ukraine, about the escalation with Taiwan, about the Korean Peninsula, the people who more or less agree with you, if they get hurt, even if you denounce and disavow, it still hurts you. And if they advance, even if they're not you, even if they're not a member of your organization, it still helps you. It does not help us to betray the people who work with us. And it does not hurt us when somebody who's not us makes a point that we would have made and gains some ground. Right? I mean, and I tried to be friendly with them. I tried to do them favors. I tried to get them interviews. And they just, no. They wanted to be my enemy. And that's how all these little tiny groups are. They're all spiteful and they're all, you know, you're either with them or against them, right? There's no middle ground. There's no compromise. There's no, well, I agree with you about this or not. Either you're with them and all the people that they have a big vendetta against from something that happened in the 70s, you hate too. You're either with them or against them. And it's a toxic formula.
So by making this video, I'm merely asserting the same right that Caleb himself asserted against the man in his old org, the Workers' World Party, before he became the man in his own org. He's not the man. Let's see what his personality cult has to say about that.
One point must also be made on behalf of the board of directors, and this is that Caleb Maupin is our ideological leader. CPI is the result of Caleb Maupin's vision for building an organization, and we recognize his unique approach to building 21st century socialism. The CPI is much more than any one personality. We don't take for granted his pioneering efforts in understanding and applying Marxism, Leninism, anti-imperialism, and even Christianity. His place as our ideological leader and visionary shouldn't be understated. And we are proud that he has this place in our organization. Thanks, Caleb.
Mere hypocrisy isn't enough for a call-out video like this, although I had enough material crying out to be used, so I dropped it anyway. So let's get to the heart of the matter, the CPI's secessionist lines. But before we can get there, we have to ask, why would such a stark disagreement about foundational lines like land back exist among communists in the first place? The answer, as with everything else, is class. You see, Caleb Maupin was a trot once in the beginning of his communist career in the Workers' World Party. He said some very true things about old Lev Bronstein, the ice pick caddy, since those times, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't still think and act like a trot. No, he doesn't believe in permanent revolution, and although it's the natural end result of his program too, he doesn't claim to look down on the rural working class. But he is an academic. He does feel a more natural sympathy with them than with the working class, which he organically distrusts, and he is inherently predisposed to put the concerns of the middle class above the concerns of the working class, which is revealed by his lines about land back. Caleb was the first one to be writing theory in what I now term the communist right. But with years to reflect on it, it seems obvious now that he was merely the first synthetic leftoid to come to realize that the real working class wasn't the people he and the rest of the movement were addressing themselves to. I made this realization before I ever became a communist, when I helped disrupt Nazi recruiting on 4chan around 2016, and had these class realities thrown in my face by the Nazis. Dialectically, I learned from my error and started developing theory based on a more accurate class analysis to fight the Nazis better, and it ended up leading me to communism and then eventually here. The whole time I was a communist, I tried to explain this fundamental class truth to the synthetic left. Most of the communists right outside the radical Republicans are those synthetic leftoids who ended up accepting that point. To Caleb's credit, he independently realized this too, and he did so as a communist writing theory before I did, the only person in America who can claim this. However, that realization didn't lead into any further realizations. It didn't make him change his fundamental assumptions on anything. He may realize now that he's not the working class, but he's not going to prioritize class above race by, say, denying the right of black nationalists to secede from the United States. William Z. Foster said something once in the 1940s, gosh golly, and the workers must be shoehorned into it. And the funny thing about all this is that he's perfectly capable of recognizing that William Z. Foster had some cringe lines.
Overall, William Z. Foster's book, Towards Soviet America, is very good, but some of the ideas in there are a little bit ultra-left and come across as a little bit heavy-handed and authoritarian. And you know, in a lot of places, the message the Communist Party was putting out is, hey, capitalism is failing, and you know, the Soviet Union's great. We're just going to copy the Soviet Union in our country. And that's not the correct way to frame things up. They learned from this.
However, remember his academic background. He's more fascinated by baubles like renaming America than by the workers his mindless utopianism is scaring off.
It's very, very readable, and it lays out the vision of what the USSA would look like, the United Soviet States of America. It's a beautiful book.
So that's why Caleb Maupin takes bad lines, and we've only begun exploring what those bad lines are. So let's get into the heart of it now. Caleb believes in race nationalists' right to tear apart America. Here he explains himself to a British communist named Harpal Brar, who argues with Caleb, but on more classically Leninist grounds.
It's more important today than ever to get rid of black nationalism as it is to get rid of white racism, to form a movement of people of all backgrounds, all nationalities, from the indigenous to the Latin Americans, to the newcomers, to the majority white people, a united Communist Party of America. Any separatism is really a license to suicide, and it should not be carried on.
In fairness, I cut out about 2 minutes of Mr. Barr explaining that if blacks were concentrated in a small area in America and wanted independence, that would be fine. I disagree with that, as do all American patriots of every background. But in all fairness, it is the classical Leninist position on the national question, and he isn't an American, so, you know, fair enough. But funnily enough, though, Caleb's boss's boss's boss, Vladimir Putin, passionately disagrees with Lenin on the national question and instead agrees with Abraham Lincoln that the division of national unions should be illegal. He said that on the verge of beginning the special military operation in Ukraine as justification for it. And I think he's absolutely right. Lenin's utopianism on this subject shouldn't be allowed to devastate Chicago like it has Kiev. Like I said, my problem with Caleb is that he's not pro-Russian enough. And here's the thing. Normal American workers, whether rural or urban, Republican or Democrat, will never voluntarily support the dismemberment of America by anyone. We fought a civil war about it to establish that principle, and the best president America ever produced, Abraham Lincoln, freed a chained race and saved the country in establishing it. No true American patriot will ever violate that principle, and if Caleb was organically in touch with the working class, he would know this. Therefore, any attempt to associate anti-imperialism with America-hating nonsense like land back merely serves the imperialists by making their opposition unpopular with the only demographic on Earth capable of ending American imperialism. That is why this matters. Caleb is helping American imperialism by endorsing these land back-rule lines, and he refuses to stop. You want evidence of this? You think I'm making it up? As alluded to at the beginning of this video, here is a land back chant Caleb permitted at the CPI Chicago conference.
Fist up! Fist up!
Did you notice what Caleb was doing during that chant? Here, get a closer look.
Fist up! Fist up!
Mind you, land back is a call to destroy America and hand it over to the likes of the Uhurus, who are the ones leading this chant. Do you think I'm still making it up or exaggerating what they mean with that land back chant? Because here's a Uhuru at the CPI Chicago conference explaining why America can't be reformed.
So I don't see any way that America be reformed. Because everything that I ever known of how it has been built has been on my back and on the indigenous people's land.
Now, what was Caleb doing while she made those treasonous statements? Let's take a look.
So I don't see any way that America be reformed. Because everything that I ever known of how it has been built has been on my back and on the indigenous people's land.
Still didn't catch it? Here's footage of Caleb nodding vigorously in agreement in front of the very flag he's betraying, no less, as a Uhuru calls for the destruction of his country.
So I don't see any way that America be reformed. Because everything that I ever known of how it has been built has been on my back and on the indigenous people's land.
Oh, but maybe I'm still taking it out of context, right? Caleb routinely annoys strangers with bullhorns in New York City while waving that flag. Surely he cannot secretly despise it in his heart of hearts and yearn to see it in the Constitution it represents destroyed, right? Well, here's the old Mopperino telling the Platypus Society what he really thinks of the Constitution. Basically, that it's a convenient fig leaf to defend the Uhurus that he intends to discard one day, and that's literally it.
I would argue that it is correct now to defend the Constitution, but that doesn't mean I think the Constitution is sacred. That doesn't mean I think the Constitution is eternal. That ultimately doesn't mean I even want to keep the Constitution. I'm a socialist, and I realize that the process of overturning capitalism in the United States will mean the creation of a new state apparatus. It will mean the creation of a new constitution, a new military, a new policing agency. So I'm not here to say that the U.S. Constitution is a sacred document that is eternal. I'm here to talk about the current context in which debate around the U.S. Constitution is taking place. Let's talk about what's going on in the country right now and why, at this moment, defense of the Constitution is necessary. The Uhuru movement.
What gives me whiplash about all this is that Caleb very much goes out of his way to present himself as not the land backaroo that he is. If he hadn't, I would have never taken much interest in him or the CPI in the first place. But here he is, correctly denouncing stuff like one settler, one bullet.
A lot of the local Workers' World Party young people were wokes. They were wokes. And when the teachers were on strike, the official Workers' World Party website in West Virginia put up a statement saying that the teachers of West Virginia shouldn't go on strike. They should pay reparations. And they're striking on stolen land. And then they put one settler, one bullet. They scabbed.
And here he also is, correctly explaining how black nationalism is a tool of the CIA that was used against African communists during the Cold War.
And ultra-leftism often is a vehicle for manipulating things. And this happened during the Cold War all the time, right? In South Africa, the main force of resistance to apartheid was Nelson Mandela and the African National Congress, the ANC. Nelson Mandela was even a member of the South African Communist Party, right? And the Communist Party said, we're going to do everything we can to support Nelson Mandela and the ANC because they're the main force of resistance to apartheid. But there was this other group called the Pan-African Congress, the PAC. And the PAC said, oh no, Nelson Mandela, he works with white people. The Communist Party has white people in it. So actually, the main focus shouldn't be on supporting the ANC. It should be on exposing the ANC because they allow white people in their organization. And the Pan-African Congress was being covertly supported by the CIA and other forces. That in the name of black nationalism, they went around killing members of the ANC. Right? And they thought they were being ultra-revolutionary. They thought, the ANC are sellouts because they have white people in their group. The ANC are sellouts because the Communist Party is backed by the Soviet Union and they have white members of the Communist Party and all that. But we're for Africa for Africans. It sounded ultra-revolutionary. Land back. And they said one settler, one bullet. They sounded ultra-revolutionary. But the Pan-African Congress, the PAC, was actually... they were being used by the imperialists, and they killed a lot of people in the African National Congress, and they were being used by the imperialists, and they were a fifth column. And this happens a lot.
And now, here he is explaining that you're a class reductionist if you don't support black nationalism.
Actual class reductionism does exist, right? There's a certain communist organization, I won't name them. They were notorious for one of their chants that they would do at rallies when they didn't like black nationalists. They took the position that black nationalists were reactionary, and they would chant, white power and black power are the same. Racism is the boss's game. They would chant that at their rallies. Well, that's class reductionism because white power and black power are not the same. The white supremacist dudes who put on sheets and do Heil Hitler salutes and say white power are not the same as black nationalists who say black power. You cannot equate those two things, right? They are not the same. There is just a fundamental difference. Black power is revolutionary in the context of U.S. society. White power is reactionary because it's about beating back the black masses. So you cannot say white power and black power are the same. And if you do that, you're engaging in what one might refer to as class reductionism because you're ignoring the obvious reality of the racial dynamic and you're just saying, well, all racial separation is the same because it distracts from class.
And, just for good measure, for that whiplash, here he is saying about the black nationalist group Black Hammer that was hiding a dead body in their basement that we don't have all the facts.
Black Hammer did a lot of cringe things for social media, but they've been good the past couple of years doing outreach to Christians and conservatives. Yeah, and you know what? I saw when they were raided and when their leader was arrested, and all I said was, we don't know what happened. I don't know what happened in that house. I don't know, I don't know what happened. I don't know if Ghazi's guilty. And I just was infuriated by seeing all these people on social media cheering on the government going after a black group that supports Russia, right?
You feel that whiplash too? Why, if I didn't know any better, I'd say it looks like the American deep state used someone's sexual perversions against them to force them to push anything but class lines like land back and race nationalism that repel the workers from anti-imperialism or something. It's not just black nationalists that he now thinks has the right to secede. He suggested that the region of Appalachia is a nation. This is ridiculous. The great state of West Virginia in the heart of Appalachia exists because its people were staunch Unionists who refused secession. But here he goes with this pathetic attempt to turn American patriots into blood and soil fascists demanding an ethno-state anyway.
You know, historically, there's been movements for Appalachian separatism, Appalachian independence. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of revolutionary potential among the workers of Appalachia.
These are old lines from the William Z. Foster days of the CPUSA, and absolutely nobody else but the divorced Democrat grifter Just James believes in them. I think it's absolutely disgusting that he wants to carve America up like this and yet postures as a patriot.
Okay, in Appalachia is almost like a nation. You could argue that it's a nation in its own way. So that's a little bit different.
And here's the thing about all this. Not only does he believe in all this obnoxious race nationalism and treasonous secession garbage, not only does he do so despite knowing how unpopular it is with the workers, but he hides it. Now that you've seen the glimmers and hints of his real attitudes towards American patriotism, watch how he likes to present himself more regularly.
They've told us for the longest time, you know, you can't be a communist. You can't be a communist because the American way, the American system, the American way of life, American patriotism, it's just the American way. We're opposed to that. Well, they hate America now. They're the ones saying that America is an evil country. We're just a racist settler country, and we should all be ashamed. We should all just wear sackcloth and beat ourselves over the head over the 1619 Project. So now, if we want to defend America, all we have to do is say, actually, there's a good part of America. There's John Brown, there's Huey Newton, there's Gus Hall, there's William Z. Foster, there's Harriet Tubman, and actually, we represent the good side of America. And while they want to destroy America, they want America to just fall apart and, you know, collapse into a woke, self-hating, you know, self-flagellation ritual. We're the ones to say, actually, there's good things in America. And if you love what's good about America, you should be a communist, because all the great people in America that stood up against their ugly wars and fought racism, they were all communists.
That's not what he really thinks, as I've just demonstrated. In his heart of hearts, he wants to rip this country apart, set fire to the Constitution. It's just all a ploy. It's flypaper dipped in honey to trap all the patriotic American workers out there who know that something's deeply wrong with this country and are looking for economically radical answers to fix it. This posturing is meant to make them feel like he's one of them, that they can trust him, and that he wants the same things they do. It's funny, but I truly think that Caleb Maupin and cult programmer Steve Hassan, who's probably behind the Caleb sex scandal leaks, deserve each other. Caleb uses a lot of cult-like tactics, so it's fitting that imperialist sleaze like Hassan is what's dispatched after him in particular. He had his John Brown volunteers selling buttons, as if that could ever pay the rent in New York City, which kept them financially dependent on him. He even let Yankee Tanky sell all his possessions to follow him, like he's Jesus or something. And by posing as an American patriot, he intends to win you over with his personal charisma. That way, when you're inducted to the actual truth at one of his events, you'll be more likely to accept it. Those personal ties have to be created first, so that the subject won't resist ideological brainwashing with seditious America hate. He regrets that the current format of his YouTube channel has already spilled the beans on his real beliefs, that his charisma wasn't sufficient to keep everyone in line like he once flattered himself to think. So he wants to take his streams private from now on, so that he can put this patriotic facade up to the general public and keep the Spicy Land back Looney Tunes nonsense that'll scare off the uninitiated behind closed doors.
A new stage will come into existence that is more professional. And these streams will continue, but they will be more internal, because as much as what we do here is amazing, and it is, as much as what we do here is utterly amazing, unfortunately, just here tonight, I've had to block a couple people that were acting like assholes in the chat. And that there is always a cancer when you get on online spaces. There's always trolls. There's always idiots. There's always idiots that act like idiots. And we would be better off if conversations like this were not accessible to the idiots. And especially if things get to a much more intense place, as they will at some point soon. We need to be able to have internal conversations that are not available to the general public. We do. And in order to do that, we need to have a mechanism for bringing people into the organization and mobilizing them to take action to achieve the organization's goals, so that this channel and these kinds of social media streams are not a mechanism for recruitment, because their recruitment ability is limited. And much of the bullshit that has gone on, unfortunately, has happened because we have this format.
I think that I'm stretching that. Well, here's Caleb's classism slipping out on accident, confirming what I'm telling you.
And as much as we get frustrated with the American people, whether they're being woke or they're being fascist or they're being MAGA or they're being indifferent to the suffering of other people or they're being selfish or they're being pessimistic or whatever.
It is truly amazing what Caleb really thinks of the American proletariat. But again, he's an academic, not one of the cool class traitory ones like Marx or Lincoln. I wish there was a nifty little clip somewhere to describe how Caleb really feels about his audience.
Actually,
oh wait, there is.
He doesn't view the people that come around as a result of his work. He doesn't view them with kindness and affection. And I think he holds a lot of his audience in contempt.
This is all contrary to fundamental principles, but it might have been possible to ignore it for a while if he was doing actual praxis. What is actual praxis in these material conditions? It's supporting the only anti-imperialist on the ballot, Donald J. Trump. But you already heard what he thinks about the MAGA working class. You already heard the scorn he has for MAGA communists. It's funny how he singles out Jackson Hinkle far more than Haas over that, because Haas actually invented the concept, developed its theory, and popularized it. Seems like if he hates MAGA communism, he should be taking it up with the Silverbacks. However, just thinking about Caleb picking a fight with that bunch is hilarious. He'd get his ass beat. But I don't think that it's just that he's avoiding a fight with Haas, who absolutely clowned him last time he uttered his name on stream. No, I think that it's that he's got personal beef with Jackson. Let's see here. Caleb has worked for RT as an American correspondent for many years now, and yet when the special military operation started and developing anti-American imperialism inside America became imperative, they initially rooted for Caleb, then saw that he wasn't getting the job done. Instead, here was this new guy, Jackson Hinkle, hugging Trump close and getting on Tucker, even back when he was on Fox News, and he was really just popularizing anti-American imperialism among the American workers, where Caleb's middle-classy approach was just holding the same dead-end rally with the same 6 speakers preaching white guilt and America hate over and over again. Anti-imperialism isn't academic to Russia. Unlike Caleb, they actually needed to succeed. So they turned to this promising young pundit, Jackson Hinkle, and he's been providing commentary quite regularly for RT now, for as important of an event as the Tucker-Putin interview, no less. What's more, and what I'm pretty sure was a low-key act of state, but based regardless, Miss Russia herself briefly dated Jackson Hinkle. If there is a more direct way to demonstrate a country's national approval of a foreign journalist, I am unaware of it. Jackson Hinkle is getting the anti-imperialist message in front of American workers in a way they can agree with, and Caleb isn't. And Caleb will never forgive him for it. Fundamentally, Caleb and the orgs associated with him are putting up a front. They're as middle-class and culturally liberal as the theater kids they emulate. Their principles are obtained by convenience and glorified by theater and posturing. Caleb openly admires Trotsky's sense of theater and tries to emulate it with his rallies and rich kid retreats, because that's how the middle class does politics. So am I saying that all communists are bad and MAGA shouldn't go anywhere near them? No, not exactly. No, not at all, in fact. Karl Marx was a Republican. His followers in America while he was alive were mostly Republicans, and American conservatism owes a lot to the communists. Ever wonder why the GOP is the only party in the West that opposes the income tax based on the labor theory of value? Where did that labor theory of value come from? The communists. But I would certainly say that no conservative should blindly trust people who call themselves communists. I don't think there was ever any danger of that, to be fair, but now you're hearing it from a communist too. The reason is not that communism is bad, but as this video shows, not everyone who calls themselves a communist is actually a communist. Not everyone who calls themselves a communist is faithful to communist theory and praxis, has your best interests at heart, loves this country, or is going to be upfront about what they think. So how do you sift out the trustworthy communists from the sketchy ones as a conservative? Look at what they believe. Do they prioritize the fight against the American imperialist deep state, or are they focusing on cultural positions that alienate them from your average American? Are they being honest and upfront with you, or are they clearly trying to hide something? Do they live upright personal lives, or have they compromised themselves spiritually and politically with their behavior? And most importantly, do they respect you and people like you, and do they have your best interest at heart, or not? So now you know, And knowing is half the battle.
Hot Take Express.
So there you go. You know, and yeah, and there you go. There you go. And, you know,